structure itself. So in this case, the plane must have disintegrated. But what happened was that plane was certainly containing large amount of jet fuel and perhaps explosives, we don't know. And that fuel being delivered to the structure caused the top 20 stories of this structure, in both cases almost, to catch fire and burn for about 1 hour or so. What happened then is that as the fire was going on, these are steel structures, and steel structure is very resilient against impact, so they did not collapse due to initial impact. But in this case, the fire went on, and steel is a material that when temperature goes up and it becomes hot, about 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, then the steel loses its strength to carry the load. So what you had here was, it was very clear on the video that we saw this morning, it was very clear that the top 20 story was burning, and the columns at the bottom of those 20 stories, which is about 90th floor, those columns collapsed due to intense heat. And when that happened after 1 hour of initial impact, then the whole 20-story top portion of structure collapsed like a what we call rigid body, like a big box. I calculated weighing about 40,000 tons, falling on the top of this 90-story building now that is underneath.
And that is the building underneath has probably been weakened by the aviation fuel that's been leaking down through the...
Perhaps we couldn't see from my view when I was looking at the video. It was not clear if there was any damage actually to the lower floors. I couldn't see any even glass broken or any dust coming out of lower floors. It looked to me that lower floors were not impacted. And I heard from a colleague of mine that actually they had engineers at the 91st floor, and they were able actually to walk out and get out of the building before it collapsed. So it seems that the lower 90 stories did not have much damage, but the top 20 stories or so were burning, and when that 20-story mass collapsed on lower 90 stories, then of course that 90-story structure was not designed to take that kind of impact, and it was kind of like hammering on top of that building with that much weight, and it collapsed completely under gravity. So it is really a case of progressive collapse due to fire that went on for an hour or so, and it weakened the columns, and when the top portion collapsed, it collapsed on the lower part and collapsed the whole structure.
Professor Astani, thank you for talking with us.
You are very welcome.
Hassan Astani is a professor of structural engineering at the University of California in Berkeley. He spoke with us from San Francisco.
We're joined now by former Senator Warren Rudman, who co-chaired with former Senator Gary Hart the U.S. Commission on National Security in the 21st century, the Hart-Rudman Commission, which completed its final report just this year in March. Senator Rudman, your report predicted, essentially, that something like this could happen, and I believe you said in your report that the question was not if a terrorist attack in the United States could happen, but when.
That's right, and we talked about two kinds of attacks. We talked about weapons of mass destruction and weapons of mass disruption, which is what we saw today.
Did you have any sense of what kind of attack the United States could expect? This was not one of those sophisticated biological weapons attacks. It was not nuclear weapons. It was instead sort of combining two things that terrorists have done in the past: suicide bombing and airplane hijackings.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about mass disruption, you're talking about using anything that is an instrumentality of high explosives, whether it be a truck, a tanker, an airplane, delivered against a target occupied mainly by civilians.
Can you shed any light on why the United States was vulnerable to such an apparently sophisticated and coordinated attack, that 4 different airplanes could be hijacked, sent after several targets, succeeding in 3 of them with apparently no warning from our intelligence services?
There are certain things which are very difficult to predict, and one of them is what terrorist organizations will do. It is one thing to have your intelligence apparatus focused on Iraq or China, but the bottom line is that these shadowy terrorist organizations who are well-financed and very competent, given enough time, with the people they have and the training they have, can carry off something like this as we saw today. So this really should not surprise anyone unless people have not been following what we know about these folks, which is quite a bit.
And do you think there's any reason to believe that the United States can protect itself against this kind of event in the future?
Well, the major recommendation we made was that this threat was the number one threat to this country, and we've laid out a whole list of things that have to be done. We believe strongly that all of the disparate government organizations that respond to this sort of event have to be coordinated. We have testified before the Congress as to the need for a Homeland Security agency. We have talked about the need to change focus of U.S. intelligence. And having said all that, I'm not sure you can prevent all of it. You can prevent some of it, but certainly the response, if this is going to continue in America, and it well might over the years, this is not like a war where you have a winner or a loser. This can go on indefinitely until the terrorists decide to turn their attention somewhere else.
Is there anything that the United States can do in terms of retaliation that might stop or reduce the threat?
Whether it can or it can't, we will, I'm sure, retaliate if we know whom to retaliate against. One of the great difficulties right now, everybody wants to point to a particular terrorist organization, and that may be right. But I would caution a little restraint on that until we have some information. And I'm sure that information will be forthcoming. But once we know that, yes, it's possible to retaliate, but you want to retaliate with the right amount of force against the right place.
Senator Redmond, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Former Senator Warren Redmond, he co-chaired with former Senator Gary Hart the U.S. Commission on National Security in the 21st Century. The Hart-Redmond